For the past century or so, academics have made a great progress in many areas, including Albert Einstein's progress on the theory of relativity, Alexander Fleming and his discovery of penicillin, Francis Crick and James Watson discoveries about DNA, etc. However, there is one field of research where we haven't made much progress, and that's within the field of economics. For the investor, a growing economy is the greatest assumption for the long-term investment and long-term returns. And that's why I'm giving you a top 5 takeaway summary of the book How an Economy Grows and Why It Crashes, written by Peter Schiff. And I am Keshav Mahajan, giving you the best tips and tools for reaching financial freedom. Takeaway number 1. The primary goal, increasing the productivity. First, we will go through 3 concepts that are very important for an economy to grow, and then we will handle 2 factors that are very important for an economy too, but that when mishandled can cause it to crash. A good definition for an economy is the effort to maximize the availability of limited resources to meet as many human demands as possible. We demand quite a lot. Basic demands include things such as food and shelter, but we also demand more advanced things these days, such as smartphones that come with the latest technologies, and supercars that came with great acceleration and environmental bragging rights. Say that it previously took people an average of 0.2 working days to meet their daily demand for food, 1,000 days to meet their demand of getting a shelter, 10 days to get that need smartphone, and 600 days for the supercar. But today, it only takes 0.1 day for the food and 500 days for shelter and 5 days for smartphone and 300 days for the supercar to meet those demands. The economy has been growing on, increase in productivity has allowed food, shelter, smartphone and supercars that are of course limited in the quantity to become more readily available to the general population. This is the goal of an economy. Think about it. Compared to before, you can now get a house, a supercar, 10 smartphones for your friend and food for 1,000 days and still have 50 days left for leisure time. Compared to buying just one house before, this must be a good thing. Just think about how many times you can spend out reading a book in a nice hammock. Supercars don't produce themselves at the price of 300 working days instead of 600 working days, just by coincidence. There are a few prerequisites for this. It usually takes new tools, which comes from innovation, which in turn comes from savings and risk taking. No person is particularly innovative if he has to work all day just to fulfill the basic need of putting food on the table for his family. For an economy to increase its productivity, then which is the primary goal? Savings are required, and this is what we all cover in the next takeaway. Takeaway number 2. Saving benefits everyone. Why savings are important for an economy to grow is quite easy to illustrate. Peter Schiff provides an excellent illustration in how an economy grows and why it crashes. About 3 fishermen living in the deserted island, but for that you will have to get the book yourself. However, just think about it like this: for every large or semi-large project, there must be savings. If no one in the economy saved up more than a single day's worth of money, I would then, for instance, large infrastructure projects be built, new medicines be discovered, industrial innovations be made. Such projects cost up to many thousand days of savings from many thousands individuals to compete. Now all savings are not created equal. Some help the economy grow faster than others. There are 4 primary ways which savings can be used. They could be saved for a rainy day, consumed for extra pleasure, lent out to someone in need, or invested. The first alternative doesn't really help the economy grow directly, but it is a great buffer for times of turmoil. Some individual companies and government have learned this the hard way during the current pandemic. Their second alternative doesn't really help the economy grow. This is the worst use of savings. The economy doesn't grow because we consume more. We consume more because the economy grows. According to Peter Schiff thinking that we can spend ourselves out of economic troubles is the main problem with the current pandemic within the field of economics. Consuming more that we can afford today will eventually be troublesome either for our future self or for our children's. Loans are the third alternative, and if they are made for the business purposes, rob them for consumption. They can really help the economy grow. Just think about the aspiring entrepreneur without savings from either himself or someone else. He or she can't possibly build his own business. He will need a steady stream of income to put food on the table for his family. The fourth alternative, which is the investments, is great for the same reason that business loans are great. By looking at the four alternatives, it's easy to see that a capitalist economy works. The lender wants interest payment and the investor wants dividends. And these are both selfish motives, but they have a positive spillover effect on everyone else in the economy too. If the person with the savings wants more on the savings, he will have to invest or lend them out to others. A very important concept here is opportunity cost. Just like pretty much everything else, savings are limited. Savings that are used for consumption could have to be used for business loans or investments. It is therefore harmful for the growth of the economies that most governments are running monetary policies which incentivize consumption but disincentivize lending and investments. I am getting ahead of myself here, but we will get to this later. Takeaway number 3, comparative advantages. Once upon a time, there existed an economy where only food, shelter, smartphone, and supercars really mattered. In the other words, not too different from the one that we have today. In this economy, only 4 people lived: able, babel, cable, and durable. They are all equally interested in food, shelter, smartphone, and supercars. What they weren't though was equally efficient in producing these items. Babel, cable, and durable could produce 1 day's worth of food by working zero point 0.2 days, while Able could produce in just 0.1 days. Babel was the most efficient shelter producer. He would build one in just 500 days, while he took the others 1,000. Cable was a gifted smartphone designer, and it took him only 5 days to produce one, while it took the other 10 days. Similarly, Durable was the most skilled supercar maker at production time of over 300 days instead of 600 days like others. If they use their talents in an optimal way, they should let Able produce the food, Babel build the shelter, Cable assembles the smartphone, and Durable makes the supercars over a lifetime. They each demand food for about 30,000 days, 5 houses, 500 smartphones. Yes, these guys are quite clumsy, and 10 supercars. If they don't use their skills or comparative advantages in an optimal way and produce everything themselves, they would each have about 10 to 11,000 days of leisure over a lifetime. However, if they use their comparative advantages and let each other do what he is best at and then trade goods with each other, they will have 18 to 20,000 days. Simply put, if the workers in an economy specialized at what they are best at, the productivity of the economy will grow. Comparative advantages are important for the economy within the country, but it is also important for the total economy across the globe. For instance, if King and Ling, who came from an outside country of Able, Babel, Cable, and Durable, would be capable of producing food in just 0.05 days and shelter in just 250 working days, everyone could have even more leisure time. Moreover, more savings would be available for business loans and investments, which could increase the productivity of the economy even further down the line. You might ask, but what would then happen to Able and Babel? Well, with some savings or potentially a business loan from Cable and Durable, they would probably discover that everyone is also interested in buying some fancy clothes and fancy watches. Now, that's their so much leisure time. Remember that the goal of an economy is not to produce jobs. The goal is to maximize productivity. In an economy where productivity is increasing and comparative advantages are maximized, the price should actually be decreasing. Link can sell shelter at a price of 350 working days and still make a profit, while Babel had to sell them at a price of 600 working days to make the same profit. Takeaway number 4, the rule of the government. There are few services that arguably should be provided to everyone in an economy, and that for one reason or another are poorly provided by a free market. Almost everyone agrees that two such needs are those of personal safety and justice. For example, Able, Babel, Cable, and Durable might consider giving away some of their production to hire Enable for security and Fable for justice. Enable and Fable would then be hired as this country government employees. One important thing to notice here is that the government itself doesn't produce the basic needs of the economy. It uses the taxpayer savings to provide services. For this reason, government spending is the same as taxpayer spendings. Never forget this. A bit more questionable is when the government starts to provide services like healthcare, infrastructure, education, and banking. Sure, these are all the services that are demanded in a modern economy. There is no discussion about that. Question is just if the government can provide them in a more efficient way than the marketplace can. Consider this, politicians want to be elected. For this reason, government spends savings where it is politically more critical to do so. Private lenders, on the other hand, only spend savings where it is economically be feasible to do so. Because of this, private lending is the more efficient in bringing out the strongest fishes and speed up the evolution in the society. Once again, the key concept is opportunity cost. Savings are necessary for economy to grow, as we have seen previously, but they come in the limited quantity. And remember that the government is nothing more than a facilitator of private saving. If the savings are wasted, the economy grows much slower than it could have. In some cases, it even causes it to crash. During the financial crisis, for instance, it could be argued that the government played an important part in the downfall. The boom that occurred in the housing prices were partly caused by the government actions. The federal interest rates have been lowered to make borrowings cheaper, and banks were incentivized to issue riskier mortgage as they knew that they could sell these loans immediately to two government entities called Fannie Mae and Frederick Mac. In other words, government decided that American private savings should go toward an upgrade in the housing standards of the people, especially with limited finances. Let's just say that this turned out to be a poor, very poor use of saving. Takeaway number 5. The function of banks. Bank facilitates two great functions in the society. They allow people to save in a safe way, and they may take more educated decisions when it comes to how the savings should be allocated than the average individual do. In this way, banks increase the productivity of savings. The interest rates of payment to those who decide to lend their money to banks were decided by three factors primarily: a desire to maximize returns on deposits, a fear of losing capital on risky projects, a time preference for consumption. Here's an interesting thing in an economy do. Today, if the government would decided that the price of the car is fixed $20,000 or that a smartphone must cost $500, what would you say about it? You would probably yell, "Communism." We do not enjoy when the government intervenes when the prices and the production of goods. After all, we all seen that what is have done to economies in the past. However, for some reasons, we are okay with the government setting the prices of savings and loans. In the US, the Fed is effectively determining the prices of money by deciding the interest rate at which all the banks can borrow and lend at through the federal fund rates. Here are three reasons of why it would be a great idea to have individual banks decide on the rates themselves, much like in any other part of a modern economy, rather than having a centralized entity deciding on it. The federal representative do not have the same skin in the game as the owner of the bank has. For this reason, they make short-term decisions that the business owner of the individual bank would never do. It is very questionable if the centralized federal can make more informed decisions than the aggregate of millions of independent decisions, well, at least more or less independent in the marketplace. The Fed typically make decisions that are based on political rather than economic factors. The chairman of Fed, for example, is nominated by the president of US. So the fate of the president and the Fed chair are intervened. And I bet that you understand yourself what type of consequences this might have. The inflationary monetary policies that are followed today are harmful to our economies. They are harmful because they incentivize spending instead of savings. This is important. Inflation is simply a means to transfer wealth from anyone who has savings in a particular currency to one who has debt in the same currency. As we saw in takeaway number 2, savings are necessary for an economy to grow. Moreover, credit and leverage being used in a stupid way has been one of the most primary reasons of all 5 of the greatest economical crashes in the history. Thanks a lot. Here is the ending. And you can also follow me on the Instagram and I can give you link in the description.